It took me 2 tries before I realized it wasn't a glitch. I typed in the code again, 4179, and held my breath. The screen flashed red. Access denied. The mechanical voice said again, without a hint of empathy. I stood there, stunned. The same 4 digits I'd used for the past 5 years. My birthday. The one I made sure even my arthritic fingers could manage. But now it meant nothing. The door didn't budge. The lights didn't flicker on. The house ignored me like I was a stranger. I stepped back from the panel and looked up at the place I used to call home. Modern lines, glass walls, security sensors tucked neatly under the eaves. My son's design. A house smart enough to monitor breathing patterns, but not wise enough to recognize its owner. The wind rustled the leaves of the Japanese maple in the front yard. It used to be a sapling when we planted it, me, my wife, and our son, Ethan. Now it was taller than the house. Strange how everything else had grown around me while I'd shrunk into the background. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. Dead. I hadn't charged it since this morning, and even then, I had to ask Ethan how to find the battery icon. My mind still worked, just not in the same way it used to. The world had moved to digital, and I'd remained analog. I knocked on the door, gently at first, then harder. Nothing. I walked around to the back, my knees creaking with every step. The gate had been locked to another fingerprint scan. I rubbed my thumb and pressed it against the scanner. Unauthorized fingerprint. Access denied. I let out a dry chuckle. Imagine that, denied by your own skin. I sat down on the stone bench by the garden path and stared at the sky. The sun had started its descent, bleeding amber into the clouds. A plane passed overhead. Somewhere in that plane, someone was probably heading home. Home. Such a simple word. For letters that carried the weight of everything I had left. Minutes passed. Maybe an hour. The smart lights inside the house flickered on automatically. Motion detected. Ethan was home. I stood and made my way to the front again, waving at the tall glass pane beside the entrance. I saw his figure move through the hallway, then disappear into the kitchen. I waved harder. Nothing. I tried calling out, but my voice cracked, barely louder than the evening breeze. Then I saw her, his wife, Julie. She walked past the entrance in her silk robe, holding a wine glass. She paused, glanced toward the door, then turned away. Did she see me? I knocked harder. Still nothing. I finally sat down on the porch steps, the cold seeping through my slacks. I didn't want to think what this meant, but the signs were there. They'd been there for months, shifting schedules, missed dinners, Ethan avoiding eye contact, Julie's sharp tongue softening only when she needed something. But this was deliberate. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope I'd been meaning to give Ethan. Inside were the title papers to the cabin by the lake. My last gift to him. My legacy. I'd signed it over yesterday. I thought he'd be proud. Maybe even happy. I thought I mattered. The porch light came on above me. The door opened. I stood, heart leaping. But it wasn't Ethan. It was Julie. She didn't look surprised to see me. Dad, she said, voice flat. You weren't supposed to come today. I used the code. It didn't work, I said, forcing calm into my voice. I thought it was a mistake. It's not. She looked past me, like she was checking if anyone had seen us. Ethan changed the code this morning. We've been meaning to talk to you. Talk to me. I repeated. You locked me out of my own house, Julie. She folded her arms. It's Ethan's house. Your name hasn't been on the deed in years. You signed it over when you moved in. My mouth opened, but no words came out. She continued. We just think. It's time, okay? You're not well. The forgetfulness. The confusion. That time you left the stove on all night. That was one time, I snapped. And I turned it off the moment I remembered. But you didn't remember, Dad. Ethan did when the smoke alarms went off. I stared at her. So you locked me out? Without even telling me. You have a place now, she said, her voice softening slightly. Golden Pines. It's one of the best. They said you'd be more comfortable there. Less to worry about. Meals, medication, company. My blood ran cold. You're sending me to a home? An assisted living residence, she corrected. Just until you adjust. I took a step back, suddenly lightheaded. Where's Ethan? He didn't want to be here for this part. This part. Like it was a procedure. A transaction. I felt the envelope crinkle in my hand. I looked down at it, me last gesture of trust, and then at her. I came to give him this, I said. I thought he should have the cabin. She blinked, then looked at the envelope like it was radioactive. Why didn't you mail it? Because I wanted to see his face. She nodded slowly, like she understood. Maybe you should keep it for now. I tucked it back into my bag. I didn't want her to see my hands shaking. A long silence followed. Crickets chirped from the bushes. A dog barked faintly in the distance. I'll call a car for you, she said finally. No, Dad. No. I repeated, quieter this time. I'll find my own way. I turned and started walking. My knees ached, my back protested, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I didn't remember how I got to the old park near the river. My legs had carried me on instinct. This place had been here longer than the city itself. No codes, no sensors, no synthetic voices saying no. Just trees and benches and memories. I sat down under the oak tree where my wife and I had our first picnic. It was the kind of memory that still came in full color. I could still hear her laugh. I could still feel the way her hand slid into mine. She'd passed 3 years ago. Cancer. Quiet and cruel. We made it through together, right to the end. She died at our home because I swore to her she'd never be alone. I kept that promise. And now here I was. Alone. I pulled out the envelope and looked at it again. The cabin. The lake. The place we used to take Ethan every summer. Where he learned to fish. Where we taught him to skip stones. Maybe that's where I should go. I reached into my coat again and felt something at the bottom pocket me old wallet. Tucked inside, folded and worn, was the last picture we took as a family. Me, my wife, Ethan, and our dog Buddy, who died the same year she did. I stared at it for a long time. Then I stood, dusted off my coat, and started walking again. I didn't sleep that night. I found a bench at the train station and sat there as people came and went, young couples with backpacks, business travelers in suits, mothers with strollers and sleepy kids. No one noticed the old man on the bench with the leather bag clutched to his chest. Around 2 a.m., a janitor passed by and gave me a nod. I nodded back. That was the most human contact I'd had in 12 hours. I waited until the morning train started running, then bought a one-way ticket to Lake Hammond, the small town near the cabin. My fingers trembled when I slid the bills under the glass window, but I managed to speak clearly enough. Senior discount? The clerk asked gently. I nodded, trying to smile. The ride upstate was slow and quiet. I sat by the window, watching the blur of trees, barns, and open fields slip by. The farther we got from the city, the lighter I felt. Less digital, less forgotten. I hadn't been to the cabin in over a decade. We stopped going after my wife got sick. Ethan lost interest when he started college, and after Buddy died, it just didn't feel the same. But I never sold it. Maybe because it was the last place where things made sense. When I stepped off the train and smelled the pine-heavy air, something in my chest eased. I flagged down a cab and gave the driver directions. He didn't ask questions. Probably thought I was just some old guy returning to his summer home. When we pulled up to the gravel road, I told him I'd walk the rest of the way. He gave me a look, half pity, half concern, but he respected it. I paid him and started up the trail on foot. It was just as I remembered. The narrow road lined with wildflowers. The broken fence Ethan once tried to fix with duct tape. The stone path leading to the porch, cracked but still holding. And the cabin, a little weather-beaten, but standing proud among the trees. I climbed the steps and checked under the flower pot for the spare key. Still there. Still rusty. The door creaked when I opened it. Dust hung in the air. The smell of old wood, pine, and time rushed into my lungs. I was home. Not the kind with voice-activated lights or retina scans. Not the kind that measured you by how productive or convenient you were. This was mine. I lit the fireplace. It took a few tries, but the flame caught. I unpacked the few clothes I had, made a pot of coffee on the stove, and sat at the window. The lake shimmered in the morning light. I stayed like that for hours. Over the next few days, I fell into a rhythm. Chop wood, brew tea, take short walks to the water. At night, I'd sit on the porch wrapped in a blanket, listening to the wind move through the trees. I didn't need much. The pantry still had a few cans. I walked into town every other day for groceries. The clerk at the market, a woman named Dana, started to recognize me. You staying up at the lake? She asked one day. I nodded. Just me. For now. You know we have delivery. I like the walk. She smiled. Well, it's good to see someone use the old place again. I didn't ask what she meant by again. I didn't need to. On the 6th day, I found the photograph again. The one from years ago. I'd left it by the window. The sun had faded the corners, but our faces were still clear. Me, younger and stronger. My wife, laughing with her head tilted. Ethan, maybe 10, grinning with a gap between his teeth. Buddy, tongue out. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote a letter. To Ethan. Dear son, you probably don't expect to hear from me, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't read this. I don't write to guilt you, or to ask for anything. I just want you to know that I'm okay. I found my way back to the cabin. You remember the place how we used to watch the sun rise over the lake? How you swore the loons were calling your name? It's still beautiful here. It still feels like home. I thought about giving it to you. That's why I came to the house that day. I wanted you to have something real. Something you could hold when everything else feels artificial. But I realize now that I still need it. Not the property. The peace. I'm not angry. Just tired. I've lived a full life. Not perfect, but honest. I made mistakes some I didn't even see until recently. But I always loved you. I still do. I'll be here for a while, if you ever feel like visiting. Love. Dad. I didn't send it right away. I wasn't sure if I should. But 3 days later, I walked into town, bought a stamp, and dropped it in the mail. Weeks passed. I fixed the shutters. I cleaned out the crawl space. I found my old fishing rod and patched up the reel. I cooked meals the way my wife used roasted trout, potatoes with herbs, cornbread in a cast iron pan. Some nights, I heard coyotes in the distance. Other nights, only silence. It didn't feel like loneliness anymore. It felt like stillness. Healing. Then one morning, I was out by the dock when I heard a car pull up the gravel road. I turned. It was Ethan. I stood frozen as he stepped out. He looked older than I remembered, or maybe just tired. His hands were in his pockets. His hair was longer. He wore the same coat I'd given him years ago for Christmas. He walked up to me slowly. I said nothing. He looked out at the lake, then back at me. I got your letter, he said. I nodded. I'm sorry, he added. I swallowed hard. I know. We stood there for a moment. The wind picked up, brushing the surface of the water. I didn't want it to happen like that, he said. With the door. With Julie. I didn't want it to happen at all, I replied. But here we are. He looked down. She thought it was the right thing. We were scared. You left the stove on. You forgot where you parked. You fell asleep with the bath running. I made mistakes, I said. But I wasn't done living. He looked up at me, pain in his eyes. I know that now. Too late. He shook his head. Not if you let me in. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I nodded toward the cabin. There's coffee on the stove. He smiled faintly and followed me home. Ethan followed me inside the cabin like he was stepping into a memory he wasn't sure still belonged to him. His eyes scanned the walls, the fireplace, the wooden beams overhead. I saw him pause when he spotted the picture on the windowsill. You kept this? He asked, picking it up. Always, I said, even when everything else went away. He looked down at it in silence. His thumb brushed lightly across my wife's face. She would have been angry, he said. She would have yelled first, I replied. Then cried. Then made you tea. He chuckled under his breath. It was a sound I hadn't heard in years, low, genuine, human. Coffee's in the pot, I told him. Help yourself. He moved to the stove and poured 2 mugs. I noticed his hands trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. He brought mine over and sat across from me at the old wooden table. I should have called, he said. Yes, I answered honestly. You should have. He nodded, accepting it. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe it was easier to follow the plan, to pretend it was about safety, about responsibility. But really, I was scared of you getting worse, of me not being enough to help. I took a sip of coffee. It was too hot, just like he used to drink it. I understand fear, I said. But you don't lock someone out of their life because you're scared. He swallowed hard. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me again, he said. Part of me didn't. He looked up. But the other part. I let out a breath. The other part still sees the boy who used to fall asleep in my lap on the dock, who cried when his kite flew into the lake, who whispered to his mom when he thought I wasn't listening. He smiled weakly. We sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the birds began calling, and the wind shook the cabin just enough to make it feel alive. I want to fix things, he said finally. You can't undo what's done. But I can show up. Be here. Learn again. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as the man who'd pushed me out of my home, but as the son who came back. The one who still carried the weight of his own failures with trembling hands. What about Julie? I asked. He hesitated. She doesn't know I'm here. I raised an eyebrow. She said I was being manipulated, that I was letting guilt cloud my judgment. But I think I just remembered how to feel. I nodded slowly. She might leave, he said, if I stay too long. She made that clear. And you? I'm still deciding who I want to be. I looked at the fire for a long moment. You can stay a few days. No promises. He nodded. That's fair. We fell into a rhythm, Ethan and I. He split logs in the mornings, his soft city hands blistering quickly. I taught him how to rub sap on them, nature's bandage, I said. He cooked pasta one night and overcooked it terribly. We ate it anyway. He asked questions about my wife, about her last days. I told him everything. Sometimes I had to stop to breathe through the ache in my chest. Sometimes he cried. On the fourth night, we sat by the lake with 2 fishing poles and no bait. It didn't matter. We weren't there for the fish. You ever scared? He asked me. All the time, I said. He glanced at me. Scared of forgetting, of fading, of being a burden, of becoming invisible. He nodded. Scared of dying? He asked. No, I said. Dying doesn't scare me. Dying alone does. He looked down at his hands. Do you think I made you feel invisible? He asked, his voice barely audible. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, when I stood outside that house, your house, and knocked for 15 minutes, and no one came to the door, yes. I did. He winced. But you came here, I continued. You remembered something that mattered. So maybe we both still have time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went out to the dock and looked up at the stars. There were more than I remembered. Maybe I'd just forgotten how to look. My wife used to sit out here with a glass of wine and name the constellations. I whispered some of them into the night. Orion, Cassiopeia, Pegasus. I don't know how long I stood there. Eventually, I heard footsteps behind me. I found something, Ethan said, holding a small cardboard box. In Mom's drawer back at the house. Thought you might want it. He handed it to me. Inside was her journal, the one she kept during her last year. I'd never read it. I didn't know it still existed. My hands trembled. She wrote about you, he said. About us. About the cabin. I sat down and opened it. Her handwriting was as familiar as her voice. Looping, soft, full of care. I turned to a page marked with a dried leaf. If they forget me, that's okay. But if they forget each other, it will break me. I stopped reading. Ethan sat beside me. We forgot each other, I whispered. But we found our way back, he said. I nodded. The stars didn't feel so far away anymore. The next morning, I made pancakes from scratch. Burned the first batch. Got the second one right. Ethan sat at the table with bed hair and sleepy eyes. I might stay longer, he said. I raised an eyebrow. I called Julie last night. Told her I needed space to figure things out. She didn't take it well. Are you okay? He shrugged. I don't know, but I feel more honest here than I have in years. I poured him more coffee. Honesty has a price. I'm ready to pay it. He looked around the cabin like it had already become part of him again. Do you think she hated this place? He asked. No, I said. I think she hated what it reminded her of. What do you mean? Slowing down. Letting go of the spotlight. Remembering who she was before everything got so curated. He nodded. Then, quieter. Do you think I hated it too? I smiled. You didn't. You just forgot how to need it. Later that day, we walked into town together. Dana at the market raised an eyebrow when she saw us. Your son? She asked. Yes, I said, trying not to sound too proud. She smiled at him. Takes after you. Ethan laughed. Hope that's a compliment. We bought flour, beans, matches, and 2 slices of fresh pie. On the way back, Ethan paused near the edge of the woods. You know, we could fix the dock, he said. Replace the boards. Add a lantern. I smiled. Sounds like a plan. Maybe build a small pier too. Enough for a canoe. Ambitious. He shrugged. I've got time. We've got time. That evening, I started a new journal. The first line I wrote was simple. He came back. And somehow, that made all the difference. The next few weeks passed like pages turning in a well-worn book, familiar, textured, unhurried. The air around the cabin carried a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for anything. Not a knock on the door. Not a call from Ethan. Not permission to exist. He stayed. At first just a few nights. Then a week. Then another. He patched up the leaky faucet in the bathroom. Repaired the screen door that slammed when the wind blew through. Repainted the porch railing in the same dull green his mother had chosen 2 decades ago. I watched him become reacquainted with his own past, sanding old memories smooth with every repair. I forgot how much work this place needs, he muttered one afternoon, sweat pouring from his brow as he dug a trench to divert runoff from the cabin's sloping backyard. You didn't forget, I replied. You just didn't want to remember. He stopped digging and looked at me. Then he nodded. That was the kind of honesty we lived in now. Not explosive, not dramatic, just steady acknowledgments of the things we once buried. One night, after a heavy rain, the power went out. It had happened 100 times before. This place wasn't built for the 21st century. We lit candles, pulled out an old deck of cards, and sat at the table in the warm orange glow. He dealt the first hand. Gin rummy, his mother's favorite. I used to cheat when I was a kid, he confessed. I knew. His mouth dropped open. You did? Son, I said, chuckling. I may have been old even then, but I wasn't blind. He laughed, leaned back in his chair, and for a moment he looked like the boy I remembered. That looseness in his shoulders, that spark in his eyes. I hadn't seen it in years. You know what I miss most, he said. What? The way Mom used to hum. That low, absent-minded hum while she was stirring soup or folding clothes. Like she carried her own soundtrack. I smiled. She did. And she hated silence. He nodded. I think I married someone who needs noise, too. Constant input. Podcasts, smart TVs, video calls, meetings. Like if the world got quiet, she'd fall apart. And you? I think I needed the silence, he said. But I forgot how to be in it. Later that week, we finally started rebuilding the dock. The planks were rotted clear through in some spots, so we tore them out and stacked the dry salvageable pieces by the shed. He measured the spacing. I hammered nails. It took us 2 full days. When we finished, we stood at the end of it and looked out over the lake. A thin mist was rising off the water. Loons cried out somewhere in the distance. I want to bring Ella here, Ethan said suddenly. It took me a moment. Your daughter? He nodded. She turns 6 next month. She doesn't really know me. Not deeply. I've been working too much. Julie thinks the only vacation worth taking has room service. Do you think she'd like it here? He smiled. I think she'd love it. She's like I used to be before I forgot how to slow down. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Then bring her. The following weekend, he left for 2 days. Said he needed to get some things from the city. I didn't ask questions. He looked at me like he didn't want me to worry, and I trusted that. It was strange being alone again. The silence was deeper now. It wasn't lonely, exactly, just echoing. I made soup the way my wife used to, and while I stirred, I hummed. Out of habit. Or maybe memory. Or both. When Ethan returned, Ella was with him. She had her father's eyes and her mother's energy. Bounding out of the car with a stuffed bunny under one arm and a crooked grin missing 2 teeth. You must be Grandpa David, she declared. I laughed. That's what they tell me. She ran into my arms before I could even bend down. Hugged me like I'd always been there. Children know something adults forget, how to love without fear. I showed her the tree swing Ethan used to ride, and she squealed like it was a new amusement park. We picked wild blueberries by the fence. She helped me water the garden, managing to soak herself more than the plants. That night, as she slept on the couch wrapped in an old quilt, Ethan and I sat on the porch, wine in our hands. She's incredible, I whispered. She is, he said. She doesn't know anything about what happened. About you being locked out. About the mistakes I made. She just knows your grandpa. She's kinder than we deserve. She's hope, he said. Julie didn't come. She texted. Once. Let me know when you're done with this phase. Ethan showed me the message without comment. I didn't say anything either. Some things unravel on their own. Others are meant to fall apart. One morning, about 2 weeks into Ella's visit, she found the journal. Her grandmother's. It was tucked on the mantel, still wrapped in a ribbon. What's this? She asked. That was your grandma's, I said gently. She wrote stories in it. Can you read me one? Ethan looked at me, then nodded. So I opened the book and read aloud. Not the sad parts. Not the end. The beginning. A story of falling in love in the fall, of carving pumpkins and walking hand in hand through piles of leaves, of watching a baby learn to laugh, of taking a road trip with no map, of painting this cabin's walls while dancing barefoot. Ella sat in my lap, eyes wide. Grandma was magic, she said. She was, Ethan whispered. That night, I placed the journal in Ella's suitcase while she slept. She would need it one day. A few days later, Ethan stood by the dock, staring out at the lake with a strange look in his eyes. You ever think about what comes next? He asked. I used to. And now? Now I just live the day I'm given. He nodded. I envy that. You don't have to. It's a choice. He turned to me. I've been offered a remote job, he said. Less pay, less prestige, but I could live up here part-time. Spend more time with Ella. With you. You don't need my permission. I want your blessing. I stood beside him and took a long breath. The wind lifted the edge of my shirt. The air was filled with pine, lake water, and change. You already have it, I said. We held Ella's birthday at the cabin. Just the three of us. She wore a paper crown made of construction paper and glitter. Ethan baked a lopsided cake. I made lemonade. We danced on the new dock under string lights powered by a solar panel Ethan installed himself. And when she blew out the candles, she whispered her wish. She wouldn't tell us what it was, but I think I knew. That night, as I watched them both sleep, father and daughter curled on the couch under the same quilt, I realized something. I hadn't been locked out. I'd been set free, not from my home, but from the illusion that my worth was tied to being useful, compliant, or digitally recognizable. What mattered wasn't access codes or title deeds or smart systems. It was this messy, imperfect return to what made us human. To memory, to forgiveness, to love. Fall arrived early that year. The trees turned like they were in a hurry, fiery reds, burnt oranges, golden yellows that made the lake shimmer like molten glass. The mornings grew crisper. The smell of wood smoke lingered in the air. It was the kind of season that made you believe in second chances. Ethan stayed. He took the remote job, bought a used pickup, installed a new roof on the cabin. Ella visited every weekend, sometimes longer. They hung her drawings on the fridge. Grandpa's house became part of her vocabulary, as natural as saying school or home. I found myself smiling more, laughing, breathing deeper. I had no idea how much I'd forgotten how to feel. One morning, I found Ethan sitting on the dock with his laptop closed beside him. You working? I asked. Trying to, but the view's a little distracting. We shared a quiet chuckle. I was thinking about the house, he said suddenly. Back in the city. What about it? I don't miss it. I sat beside him. The wood was cold beneath us. It never felt like mine, he continued. Just a showroom. Like everything had to be spotless and optimized. Julie designed every inch of it. Even the damn soap dispensers. You miss her? He looked out across the lake. I miss who I thought she was, he said. But maybe I never really knew her. Or maybe we both changed and didn't tell each other. I nodded slowly. She called last week, he said. Oh. Said she's filing for separation. I watched a ripple move across the water. How do you feel? Relieved, he said after a moment. And sad. But mostly, like I can breathe again. I looked at him. You know, this place, it's not just the wood and the walls. It's what we made inside it. Me. Your mother. You. I see that now, he said. And I want to keep building it. We sat in silence for a long while. Then I reached into my pocket and handed him the envelope. The cabin's still yours, if you want it. He frowned. I thought you said you still needed it. I do, I said. But now it's ours. Not a handoff. A hand in hand. He took it gently. You sure? I smiled. You built the dock, fixed the sink, burned the eggs, and still came back the next morning. I'm sure. A week later, we buried a time capsule. Ella's idea. She brought a shoebox from town, and inside we placed the following. One of her drawings of Ethan and her fishing on the lake. A spoon from the cabin kitchen. A pine cone from the path behind the house. My wife's old bracelet. A small stone I'd kept from the garden, our initials carved on it. And a letter written by all three of us. We wrapped it in plastic, sealed it tight, and buried it beneath the tree swing. When do we dig it up? She asked. Maybe never, Ethan said. She frowned. Then why bury it? To remember who we are now, I said. So even if we change, this moment stays. She looked satisfied with that answer. Children understand more than we give them credit for. One day, I forgot the name of a flower. It was small, blue. My wife had planted it years ago. I stood staring at it, frustrated. I could see the petals, smell the scent, recall the way she used to brush past it with her skirt. But the name, gone. I sat down on the porch step and closed my eyes. I'd always feared this. The unraveling. The slow, silent retreat of memory. It had begun, Maybe long ago, maybe just now. But it was real. That night, I told Ethan. He didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He didn't tell me I was fine. He just sat beside me and held my hand. I'm here, he said. No matter what. We'll walk through it together. I nodded, and tears came. Quiet ones. Not for the flower, but for the beginning of forgetting. The months rolled on. We built a garden bench by the water, repainted the shutters, made pancakes every Sunday. I taught Ella to whittle with a pocket knife. She carved me a heart and painted it red. It sat on my nightstand. Sometimes I woke in the middle of the night and couldn't remember where I was. But always I remembered the love, the sound of Ella's laughter, the feel of Ethan's arms steadying mine on a walk, the warmth of the fireplace and the silence that didn't ask anything of me. Winter came. The first snow fell soft and heavy, blanketing the roof and turning the path into powdered glass. We stayed indoors, wrapped in layers, telling stories by the fire. Ella had taken to calling me Papa D. She curled beside me one night and asked, "Will you always live here?" I smiled. "As long as I can." "And after?" I looked at her, this small, bright soul with more wisdom in her than the world knew what to do with. "After, I'll still be here. In the dock you built with your dad. In the swing under the tree. In the stories you tell your own kids someday." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Then I'll never forget you." One morning, in early January, Ethan found me still in bed, eyes open, unmoving. He sat beside me and waited. For the first time in his life, he didn't try to fix or panic or call someone. He just placed his hand on mine and whispered, "I'm here." After a few moments, I blinked. "I was dreaming," I said. "About what?" "Her." She was humming. He nodded. "Do you want to get up?" he asked. "Not yet." He didn't move. "Take your time." The next spring, they planted more flowers around the cabin. Ella wore gloves too big for her, laughing as she sank her hands into the earth. Ethan took over the garden, built shelves inside, brought in books, bought a radio that only played classical music and bird calls. He kept the fireplace lit at night. Sometimes, he talked to me like I was still there. Sometimes, I answered. In his dreams. In the wind. In memory. Epilogue. Years later, Ella stood by the lake with her daughter. The cabin had aged but stood strong. The dock was now wider, with a bench at the end. The swing creaked in the breeze. The garden bloomed with colors her grandfather would have forgotten the names off but loved all the same. "Papa D lived here?" the little girl asked. Ella smiled. "He lives here," she said. And then, from her pocket, she pulled a key. A simple, worn key. No code, no screen, no synthetic voice. Just a way back in. And they walked inside.